All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ryan Suter. I'm a Senior Investment Manager here at Sharewise, and we're here today with Race Oncology with the CEO Daniel Tillett. So how today's going to work is Daniel's going to give us a presentation just to check in on the company, see how things have been going, and then we're going to open it up to a bit of Q&A. So feel free to submit questions, that I'll ask to Daniel during the Q&A segment, just for the Q&A function in Zoom, and we'll get those answered at the back end of the webinar. All right, thank you very much, Daniel. It's all yours. Take it away.
Okay, thank you very much, Ryan. So I'll just bring up here, hopefully everyone can see this presentation, the first slide here on the screen, if that's the case. Hopefully Ryan will give me the thumbs up. Yep, excellent. Okay, so Race is a biotech company. We're in the space of oncology, so cancer treatment, but we have a really unusual lead drug known as Bizantrene, and it has a lot of interesting properties about it, and I'll tell you some of that about. Hopefully this will go forward. I'll skip over this slide. You guys can read this slide at your leisure. It's basically telling you it's not financial advice. So this is sort of the key highlights of Race Oncology. And what is it that makes Race Oncology an interesting company and something to consider as an investment? The really interesting thing we have is this drug called Bizantrene. So it's a drug that was originally developed in the 1970s. It was tested in a lot of patients, a lot of clinical trials, about 50 different clinical trials were run, proved to be really effective in a wide range of different cancers. But for what are known as formulation issues, it never managed to make it commercially. And so it got dropped by the company that was originally developing it. And Race has since acquired this drug and gone about fixing the problems that caused the drug to be dropped. So what we've done is we've taken an asset that we know works. We know it works very well, actually, and fixed the problems that exist through reformulation. And that really changes the risk profile. In biotech and oncology in general, the chance of success is very low, about 3% for a new drug coming through that'll actually make it onto the market. With reformulation, where you've taken a drug that you already know works, the chance of success is much higher, 80%, 90% for those sorts of drugs that have gone through. So from an investment perspective, you pay for a lot. You have to invest in a lot of companies to get a success through. But if you're able to invest in a company that has a drug that's already proven, then that risk goes down and then the opportunity becomes worth a considerable amount. The thing about Bizantrene is obviously cancer is a serious problem, but there's a lot of drugs. But what we solve is we have an ability to overcome one of the major limitations of chemotherapy in general, which is damaging to the heart. And unfortunately, the heart is an organ in the body that's easily damaged and has no repair capacity. So once you damage your heart, then you're left with that damage for the rest of your life. And this is a really common outcome from patients who are treated with cancer. And it's unfortunately all too common to be treated and cured of your cancer and then go on to suffer, heart failure, which is, terrible outcome. The advantage we have of going after this particular market, and I'll talk more about it when we get into the details, is it builds on an existing market. We don't have to create a new market. We're actually an add-on to a very, very large market, and the class of drugs that we work well with are these known as anthracyclines. Millions of doses of these are given every year. It's a huge potential market there. On top of all of this, you want to have something that's not going to be incredibly expensive and take a long time to get to market. That's often in developing a drug, it takes an awfully long time, and it takes often hundreds of millions of dollars. So because of the history behind the drug, we have a way of basically getting rapidly to market. So you're not looking at ridiculously long times and huge amounts of money, which has to be paid for by shareholders. And on top of this, management's got a proven track record of, technical deal and ASX track record. So Race becomes an interesting company to look at from that perspective. It's a bit of a corporate snapshot. Current share price as of today or yesterday is $1.61. Gives us a market cap around 270 million. We've had, quite a pickup in the last few months, basically involved around delivering on the various things that we said we'd be doing. And we've been able to raise some money at the same time of to pay for all the various clinical trials we have coming up ahead. This just gives you an overview of the management and board. We all have a lot of experience across a wide range of backgrounds, and we really sort of know what we're doing and how to actually bring a drug like Bizantrene to market. So I mentioned right at the beginning that Bizantrene's proven, and it's proven not just in mice, like most drugs, proven in humans. So in breast cancer, there was a huge phase 3 trial run in the late 1980s. Actually turned out to be better than any of the current clinical drugs that were on the market at the time. Still the current standard of care drugs used, like doxorubicin. And unfortunately, the company that had developed it decided to end the commercial development of the company before they got the results for the phase 3 trial. Probably not a wise thing, but in the end, they actually ended up with a really interesting result where the actual patients that were given Bizantrene actually performed better than any other patients in the trial. The other one is in acute myeloid leukemia. This is a very devastating and very rapidly and very difficult to treat leukemia. And managed to make it all the way through to approval in France for this particular disease. Has a very high response rate as a salvage agent where many of these patients are untreatable. And a couple of these French girls are still alive to this day because they got Bizantrene. So we know the drug works, but the problem with the drug really evolved around its delivery, and I'll talk a little bit about that after I get past this slide. So cancer chemotherapy is sort of the backbone of treatment of cancer still to this day, even though new treatments like immunotherapy and CAR-Ts and things like that are coming along that are very exciting scientifically. For about 85% of patients, they rely on chemotherapy because there is no targeted drug or treatment for them. And with that comes this problem of heart damage in particular, but also other damage to other organs in the body. And as there's been a growing awareness of this problem, there's really a growing understanding we need to do something about that. And this is a real, if you talk to clinicians about chemotherapy, it's kind of one of these things, they have to use it, they know it works, but they know it comes with incredible damage to the patients. So the obvious solution to that is we need to improve chemotherapy. If we have to use it, we have to make it less dangerous. There's a real opportunity there to solve that. And we're lucky to be, I guess, or we have an opportunity in this space to be able to solve what is the biggest problem, which is what's known as cardiotoxicity, damage to the heart, toxicity to the heart. I mentioned before about it being a large market. Obviously, anthracyclines are used all around the world. Even in Australia, every year there's tens of thousands of patients treated. In Europe, there's millions of patients. US, same thing. These are very, very widely used drugs. You see all the different cancer types there on the right-hand side. This is an existing market already that's been widely used. You don't have to go out there and create a market from scratch, which can be difficult. So what have we done at Race? So we've taken this drug and fixed the problems with it through what's known as reformulation. That's allowed us to create new IP, intellectual property. You have new patents over this formulation. And we've been able to take that as well and leverage the scientific discoveries that have been made in cancer research over the last 40 years and work out how to best use Bizantrene and where it works best. We had discovered this combination. The drug has both protects against damage to the heart when used in combination with these chemotherapeutic drugs, and also increases the anti-cancer activity. So it's a really great opportunity there. So we've also built and run a couple of phase 2 trials in AML, which have shown really good responses in really difficult to treat patients, and undertaken a lot of research to identify which is the best market to go after. And this is often an area where many biotech companies don't put as much emphasis on as they should, which is making sure you identify what is the best market, what is the best approach. It's very easy to just say, okay, well, this looks really great in the clinic or in the lab, and miss it, say, well, where are we going to sell it? What is it going to make it stand out from every other drug that's on the market? And it's really an important area. We've done quite a lot of work around that as well. So I mentioned this formulation. We have a new formulation called RC220, and it really solves the problem. Unfortunately, the thing that got this drug originally killed commercially was you had to deliver it via a central line, which is basically a catheter that goes directly into the heart to deliver it. And the reason why is that if you put it in the blood, it immediately crystallizes out, causing all sorts of problems. You do not want to have crystals of anything in your blood. So what we've been able to do is reformulate that so that it doesn't occur anymore. And you can now deliver it via a peripheral vein, so a vein in the arms or legs. It has all the same activity and the properties of the prior drug, but just doesn't have this one particular problem. And this provides strong IP. The only downside to all of this is considered a new drug product. So you require a new non-clinical safety data package, which we're currently undertaking. We're right at the end of that, and we expect to be able to announce to the market the outcome of that work at the end of the quarter. We've also manufactured the drug to what's called GMP, which is very exacting standards that the regulators like the FDA and the EMA require before you can put a drug into a patient. All really good. This is just here. We've actually identified this combination. This is doxorubicin. It's the most widely used drug in chemotherapy. The combination of this improves killing of doxorubicin of cancer cells about 85% across all cancer types. It's a really nice combination because we go everywhere where doxorubicin's used, you can use bisantrene beside it. It doesn't increase the significant toxicity that much at the levels that we use, but we get this increased killing of the cancer cells, which is exactly what you want. The really exciting part, though, is it actually protects the heart from the damage caused by doxorubicin. So doxorubicin, incredibly effective anti-cancer drug, but it comes with this toxicity to the heart. Causes, you can see down there on the bottom, on the left-hand side, it causes fibrosis, which is basically scar tissue within the heart that stops it from working. And when you use the combination together with Bizantrene, not only do you kill the cancer better, but you protect that damage to the heart. So you've got a 2-for-1 type drug that's very unique. There are plenty of drugs out there that can help protect against the heart, but none of them actually help kill the cancer cells. So from a commercial perspective, you have to have both properties to have a really a very exciting opportunity in this space. Obviously, as I mentioned before, we did a lot of work into the market potential. We tasked Triangle Insights, who are a primary market research firm, to go out and talk to doctors, both at key centres, community doctors who are treating patients in the community. Also, really importantly, to talk to insurance companies, what are known as payers, to see what would be, whether they would be interested in paying for this, would they be willing to pay for this, would they have pushback, and to get a real idea of what the market potential is. So this is just for breast cancer, which is just one of the many dozens of different cancers where anthracyclines are used, or doxorubicin's used. And you can see there's some really, very large sales. These are annual sales at very reasonable sort of prices. So there's definitely a large market there for this. Obviously, the US is not the only place in the world. And so we also looked at the rest of it around the world. And the combination of anti-cancer plus cardioprotection has a potential market sales to the rest of the world over $7 billion a year. A rough rule of thumb in the biotech space is a drug is purchased typically 3 to 5 times peak market sales. So you can start to do the numbers on that and realize that there's a really massive opportunity ahead of us. Where are we? This is our clinical pipeline. Been in phase 2. We've run 2 phase 2 trials now with the previous formulation. In acute myeloid leukemia, the previous formulation is not so much of an issue in AML. Very successful. The final stages of the second trial are coming up, but we're seeing 40% in patients that are basically untreatable through any other form. And then we have, coming at the end of the year, we have 2 new trials, one looking at for cardioprotection and anti-cancer in solid tumors. So that's just basically all non-leukemias. And then another trial in acute myeloid leukemia as a low dose in combination. That's an investigation trial. Both of those are very interesting trials, fully funded for all of this work. We're even fully funded for the phase 2 in 2026, as long as our options that we have that are out in the money remain. This just gives you an overview of what this program looks like. It's utilizing a very interesting way of measuring the damage to the heart that's very sensitive, called VO2 peak. Very innovative in oncology. It's very not innovative in cardiology. But this will give us an indication about whether we are able to achieve what we've seen in animals, this cardioprotection plus anti-cancer together in humans. And if we do, I think we'll be a long way down the path to success. The AML trial, building on, as I mentioned, the evidence that existed for AML, both historically and our own trials we've run. And we're running a trial in combination with a drug called decitabine, a standard of care drug for AML patients, to try and improve that. So we've got a lot of preclinical data that suggests this combination is very, very effective. And the investigator for that trial is so excited about that preclinical work that they've decided they want to run their own trial, and we're going to support that. From a investor perspective, there's a lot of milestones and news flow to be expected. We're not a company that just lets the investors sitting around waiting for things to happen. We always have news flow going. There's a lot of activities going on, and we like to update our shareholders very regularly on the various activities. So there's a lot to look forward to. So it's not just a matter of putting your money in and sitting around waiting for years for clinical trials to come to conclusion. A lot of news flow. And bringing back to the key highlights of Race Oncology, it's a great place to really stop on and really say, what is it about Race that's different to other biotechs? Really, it's the risk profile, 80% chance of success versus 3%. I like that. And I think if you're an investor in biotech, you should like that as well. Solving a real problem. It's a real major market. It's a relatively low cost, fully funded pathway to approval. And all of us at Race are committed to ensuring that we bring Bizantrene back to market. So it's already been approved once. We're just fixing up the problems and bringing it back, making sure that modern patients can get access to what is a very, very unique and interesting drug, solving a really difficult problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that one, Daniel. I found that one really informative. So we'll just start the Q&A component of the webinar now. So if anyone's got any questions, feel free to submit those. I'm just going to kick things off with a couple of questions from myself. Now, Daniel, obviously you've gone through and you showed us a timeline of how everything is progressing with the multitude of drugs in development at the moment. What would you say the key milestones are that are kind of in the pipeline for investors at the moment?
Yeah, so the next major milestone will be completion of the non-clinical toxicology study, which basically gives us the green light to go into humans again with the new formulation. So we have the old formulation, which we can use, but the new formulations, new drug, as far as the regulators are concerned, and having that data set will allow us to go back into humans. So after that, the next one is to then get back straight into, we've been doing a lot of work in parallel with the clinical team to ensure we have the clinical trial plan lined up, ready to go to be able to treat patients later in this year. So once we do that, the trials are what are known as open label trials. They're not double blinded. So we actually get data as the trial is continuing, and we'll be able to update our shareholders as we're going along. So we have a couple of trials in that space. So that's really important. Sometimes, I'm invested in quite a few biotechs, and you go years between hearing news because you're waiting for the results of a trial to come to an end. We don't have that. We're lucky in that we don't have to do that where we are. And so we have the ability to be able to, as patients progress through, we can actually update and let our shareholders know how things are going.
Okay, gotcha. And you did discuss that there was a other multitude of drugs that can be used throughout the chemotherapy process that act to protect cardiovascular health.
Yeah.
Right? If your drug comes onto the marketplace and acts to protect cardiovascular health on like just as well as any other drug, but also has increased cancer killing capacity, why would there be a need for any other drugs in the marketplace?
Yes, that's an interesting question. The reason why there's been lots of these drugs developed, and in fact, there's a few of them on the market, but none of them are used, and which is kind of crazy. And the reason why is the insurance companies won't pay for them. This is what they do is they say, "Oh, wait for the patient to get heart damage, then we'll pay for the drug." They won't pay to prevent something. This is what's called supportive care drugs, and they just won't pay for them. This is one of the things we discovered when talking to the payers in the US, is they just will not pay. And unfortunately, when you have damage to the heart, you can't fix that afterwards. Once that heart's damaged of a patient, it's permanent. And even small levels of damage actually add up to, over a long period of time, a much higher risk of suffering from either heart failure, heart attack, a stroke, basically anything to do with the heart you could imagine is a consequence of these drugs. And unfortunately, they can't use this. The other one, and the reason why they won't pay for it is because of they'll only pay for drugs that are efficacious on the cancer. So they'll pay for anti-cancer drugs, but they won't pay for supportive care drugs that protect the heart. So if you're going to be able to change the current practice within the market, you have to have a drug that is both anti-cancer and cardioprotective at the same time. And this is a very difficult property to create in a drug because all the anti-cancer drugs kill cells in the body. And then you have to have at the same time a drug that protects cells. And the difference between the cells of the heart versus the cancer cells, they're both cells. And so you're trying to do opposite things at the same time. And so this is a property that hasn't been discovered in other drugs. People would like to have this, and we just happen to be incredibly lucky to have this combination between these two drugs. And it's one of the discoveries that Race made. The original developers weren't aware of this property of the drug.
Yeah. All right. Gotcha. Well, thank you for that clarification. And just one more from me. So when you showed the profitability and revenue forecast, you stated as a disclaimer that you thought of a 50% reduction would be appropriate in the physician adoption rate. Now, do you expect the adoption rate to fluctuate like greatly from that 50%? Or is the 50% kind of a general established like biotech baseline?
Yeah, that 50% is actually not a 50%. What that came about from was when they Triangle Research went through and modeled after they did their research, after talking to the doctors and payers, pricing and all the rest of it. They went through and then at the end of that process, they just applied they did all their modeling from the bottom up, and then they just applied for no, I can't say rational reason, they just applied a 50% across the top haircut. So they just halved. So that $8 billion peak sales is actually after that 50% cut. They actually got a $16 billion a year sale.
Yeah. Okay.
And then they just said, "Oh no, that's too big," effectively, and said, "We're just going to cut it in half for no reason." If you ask them, "What's the reason for doing this?" Yeah, okay. There's no rational reason for it other than the number looked too big. In fact, this is one of the areas that I really struggle with when I talk to investors. Is they go, "How could your share price be this if this is the size of the opportunity?" And that's one of the great things about the biotech space. Personally, I'm primarily an investor, and that's how I came to Race as an investor. I look at biotechs, and they're often very mispriced. They're either often overpriced, but they're often underpriced, and investors often find it difficult to quickly price in the risks and the values of a particular company. So if you go through and you try and do a ground up model, it's very hard to come up with a value for Race that corresponds to its current market cap.
Yeah.
And that's what you're looking for as an investor. You're looking for undervalued assets that are going to appreciate over time.
Yeah, of
You don't
course.
want to buy something that's massively overpriced, it's going to go down. You want to look for something that the market's mispriced, and then you can sit back and wait for the market to eventually wake up. And this happens all the time in the biotech space. There's just massive overprice, either overvalued or undervalued, and then over time, as the science and clinical progress evolves, you'll start to see a convergence on the true value of the company.
Yeah.
So that's what makes biotech investing exciting. That, apart from the other thing, is that you're actually, making a difference to people's lives. So if we succeed, there'll be literally millions of people in the world who'll be better off because we brought our drug to market. And when you compare that to, say, investing in a speculative mining company or something like this, the best you can hope for is a big hole in the ground and a lot of dirt shipped to China. So,
Yeah.
this is that aspect is a really important aspect of when it comes to investing in, these types of medical advances.
Okay, well, thank you for that one. We've got a couple of questions here submitted. Now, given the success and interest in regional license agreements among Australian biotech firms, can you update us on our status regarding licensing and partnership opportunities? And if we haven't been approached yet, what's the timeline for attracting
Yeah.
interest?
So none of those questions I can answer directly because they're all price sensitive.
Yeah.
But what I can say is that, yeah, regional licensing has become a standard practice within the biotech space. I think Dimerix is a good example of this of recent times. They did two regional licensing deals. They protect their major market, where most of the value is, sell off, say, the bottom 20% of the market in value terms, and that can fund your entire clinical program.
Yeah.
One of the difficulties we face with Bizantrene is the market is actually very large everywhere. And because we're well funded at this stage, we don't really, the longer you can hold off signing a license deal, the better the value you can extract for your shareholders. So it's a matter of balancing, but it's certainly something that we're actively pursuing at this point.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Thank you. Another one here, which is now that Race has achieved funding for the clinical trial by the latest option round, I'm sure shareholders are keen to hear who these investigators are and if there is an ANN in preparation.
Yes, we'll be updating the market shortly. The background to that story for your other is that the AML trial was contingent upon us raising the capital required to fund that. So we have a policy that we don't undertake a clinical program unless we have the money to complete that clinical program. Otherwise, you can get yourself into a lot of trouble if you get halfway down through and then realize you don't have enough money to complete. So now that we've raised that money, there will be an announcement in that very short time about that, and we'll have more details for our shareholders. But it's a great piece of news to look forward to.
Yeah, thank you. There was a mention of a 80% chance of success earlier in the presentation. How did Race come up with that number related to Bizantrene?
It's really, from what we can, in the oncology space, it's basically 100%. But, you're just discounting that back. You should never say anything's 100% in biotech. There's always risk. Things can go wrong. What we're doing is we haven't changed the drug. We already know the drug works. All we've done is taken away the property, which was this crystallization that occurs in the blood. Otherwise, the drug is exactly the same inside the patient. So if it worked in the past, if it works in the current time in our other clinical trials, the formulation is not going to make it not work. So it's basically proven to work in humans. And that's the really difficult thing in biotech is you do a lot of research in the laboratory. You can show a drug works in mice or rats or whatever animal is your target. But then when you get to humans, all those great plans go astray. That's why you have clinical failure all the time. And it's a very low chance of success. And it's basically because the drugs, they work fine in mice. We're great at, I guess, curing cancer of mice. But when you get to people, people are different. They're much harder to treat for cancer than mice are. And so many drugs that everyone thought were going to work fail. So it's much better to start with a drug that you already know works in people It's already got through all the way through to approval, and then work backwards and say, okay, can we take a drug that had everything going for it clinically except this property of crystallization and solve that problem, which we have done. So, of course, until we test it in a patient, it's possible that, even though we've tested it in multiple animal models now without a problem, and we know what causes the crystallization, it's just pH, which is exactly between animals and humans. But all of those things, there's always a risk that something might happen. So there's no certainties in life. There's certainly no certainties in investing, and there's even more so, there's no certainties in investing in biotech.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Couple more questions here. I've got, hi Daniel, is the method of action known?
Yes.
Good to hear.
Yes. So, but we haven't, it's known to within a certain percentage of accuracy. So we're still ongoing work. It's very difficult to prove anything in science. You have to do a lot of experiments. You have to do a lot of confirmational experiments to make sure that you haven't just fooled yourself. And that's where we currently are in that process. So we're very advanced. I would say past 90% certainty, but there's always risk that we could be wrong. It's kind of a bit of a funny question as a scientist. I really want to know how something like this works. How does bisantrene both kill the cancer better plus protect the heart, which is a really, unusual combination. But from a patient's perspective, it doesn't really matter. What matters is, does it do that? How it does it is, things that scientists and doctors want to worry about, and our shareholders as well. They're very keen to know. But yeah, it's really part of this will ultimately become, I think, a very impressive scientific publication, posters at conferences and talks and so forth, because it's a very unusual and a very exciting discovery.
Yeah. All right. And just one last one to wrap it up. Can investors expect a readout of the open label P1 trial by end of year, assuming no issues with recruitment?
Well, it's unlikely that you're going to get what would be considered a readout, just because it just takes time. So basically, to treat a patient, it's about 3 months. They are on chemotherapy, they go through 4 cycles every 3 weeks. So just to get through that, then you've got to measure at the end of that. So you're talking at least 4 months. So the probability, unless a patient got treated in August, you're not going to have readouts of the outcome of that. You can expect, the shareholders can expect patients will get treated, but we'll expect to see updates on actual activity, later in the first half of 2025.
Okay. Thank you very much for that clarification, Daniel. Well, that about wraps everything up for us. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for coming to the webinar of Race Oncology. And thank you very much, Daniel, for your time.
Thank you, Ryan, and thanks for all the great questions.
Appreciate it all. See you later.
Bye.